Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello.
Now we seem to have a bit of, we might have some weird delay, but we'll sync this stuff up after, and you might not even be able to tell the difference, but, you know, at this stage, who can tell? I don't know. But there's all sorts of Resident Evil things a-kicking, and so we thought we'd dive into them. Now, Resident Evil 3, the embargo just is up for it, so you can go and watch Jules' review. But also, there's this leaker out there called Dusk Golem, who's a video game dev, and he was someone who actually leaked the existence of the Resident Evil 3 remake, let's say months before it actually came true. And that person's been out on Twitter just teasing their arse off, just telling everybody about what's potentially coming. And so there's quite a few tweets for this. It started from a discussion with a fan who he responded and said, "Oh, you've asked all the right questions. It seems like the next game is going to be a cross-gen game." And then he just said he'll elaborate on those potential details. So these are just the tweets, and just said the 2021 Resident Evil game started development in late 2016. By the time it releases, it'll have been in development for 4 to 4.5 years. So it's been in development at the moment for 3 to 3.5 years, which means that they cancelled something after like a year in. Its development is apparently very similar to the original Resident Evil 3, but he won't expand on what he means by that, but we think we know what that is anyway. Josh does. The announcement will be very soon, and it'll be by far the biggest departure the series has ever taken. Also, he says he expects a lot of people to be pissed off about it when it gets revealed, but they should be open-minded because internal testing and the like show that it's high quality, and he's quite excited about it.
Yeah, like, this lines up with the other rumours that have been doing the rounds for, over a year now? Not only by the Dusk Golem, aka Aesthetic Gamer themselves, but also by, Evil VR. And there was a bunch released earlier this year by Twisted Voxel, I think. So yeah, the idea is that there has been one Resident Evil game in development for around 3 to 5 years at the moment, which seems to be the one they're talking about now, and also another game that was scrapped about 6 months ago, or maybe a bit longer now, that Aesthetic Gamer also reported on in January. That originally was supposed to be the real Resident Evil 8, and this other one was supposed to be a spin-off from Resident Evil 7 that was going to be first person and continue that thread. But the interesting thing here, I think, Scott, is the comparison to Resident Evil 3, because that originally started as a spin-off as well, and then became a numbered title. So, going off what they've said, it makes sense to me that the Resident Evil 7 spin-off has now been reconfigured to be Resident Evil 8, and that's why people are going to be a bit annoyed, because it's doubling down on those elements rather than returning to the, over-the-shoulder third-person style that Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remake has sort of brought back to the forefront.
Yeah, that's the stuff that I drastically prefer. So there's a little bit more detail, and then there's we can get into that stuff, because I think when he says that he's going to expand on things going forward, and the comparison to the original Resident Evil 3, like you're saying, that is what he's getting at, that it's something starts as a spin-off and becomes main canon, or becomes a main installment. So in that same tweet thread, one of the fans responded and said that they'd screen grabbed a date from the Resident Evil 3 demo, the one that's on the PlayStation Store, and I think it's on Xbox at the minute as well, that if you pause it at the right frame in the trailer that plays at the end of that demo, you can see a date, and it says 01/28/2021. So obviously in American dates, that's the 28th of January next year, and that would follow their sort of 1 year window that they've done for Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and then whatever the hell's coming next year. So after that, we had another tweet from Mr. Dusky Golem saying, "Let me clarify that with the overall tweet thread, he's saying on the 2021 Resident Evil, he's sticking to things that he knows are 100% true and are unchangeable at this point. He'd say, I'd be more openly blunt, but I'm aware of someone sharing the full scoop in April because they've done a lot of investigation." Now that sounds like Jason Schreier, because who else is going to be investigating anything?
Okay.
In gaming. I think if there's a big old Kotaku expose in April for Resident Evil, it's Kotaku, it's Mr. Schreier. So he says he's not going to be the one breaking the story. Whether he did it or not, it's going to get out there. And he says he'll expand on it when the time comes. But to get back to the stuff that you said, Josh, like that idea of them doing like them sort of playing with the idea of first person and third person, I wonder if, this is just me pure spitballing, that because they've done the tech for Big Ol' Beasties, they've done Mr. X and Nemesis with this new technology, I wonder if they're going to do a raid-based Resident Evil, and that'll be why people would hate it. Because you take the Resident Evil Resistance stuff, you've got your group-based mechanics, you've got that idea of everyone beaming in, and you go up against all these various big, over-the-top, iconic monsters from the series, and that's why everybody would hate it. But he still
you know
gets
what?
to refer to it as a high quality product. So yeah.
I've never thought about it. It's never even crossed my mind that it might be something like that. You know what I mean? When they're referencing, pissing off fans and stuff, I assumed it was just from the single player or story components rather than anything else. But you know what? They've dabbled in multiplayer and different kind of approaches to gameplay in the past. That to me would be absolutely mad, though. I'm not gonna lie.
See, the thing is that the Resident Evil Resistance obviously comes with the Resident Evil 3 package. Now, I have not played any of that. I haven't played any of the beta or anything like that. But I don't think they've done a very good job of even presenting its positives. It seems like most people, including Mr. Jules Gale, who reviewed Resident Evil 3, was just like, we'll get to that at some point. The vast majority of people, and Jules and Ben Roy are massive Resident Evil fans. So are we, really. And I don't think anyone's actually bothered about the idea of a multiplayer Resident Evil. So I don't, if they're going to lead with that more. I mean, this is obviously pure speculation, but even that idea of leading with multiplayer Resident Evil stuff, do you think that is something that is that the sort of thing that would piss off the fan base?
I think it would, but I don't think Capcom is kind of dumb enough or whatever to do it, just because they made a lot of mistakes in the past, and they finally got back in the good books with fans when it comes to, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, but they have got Resident Evil Resistance, and they did show that off before we knew Resident Evil 3 existed, and the response to it, like you've said, was kind of muted. I think it looks quite good, but the idea of a Resident Evil multiplayer game is so soured in the minds of fans. We've had to sit through, Operation Raccoon City and stuff like that.
Umbrella Corps.
The games, Umbrella Corps, the games themselves haven't been good, and I think in a lot of ways it's kind of ruined the idea of any sort of Resident Evil multiplayer going forward, because as good as it can be, there's been too many bad ones in the past, and Capcom has treated that style of gameplay just far too, negatively, and just kind of thrown it into the bin, as it were, more or less. So it would piss off the fans. For me, I think that it's going to be more the fact that they're following in the footsteps of Resident Evil 7 that's going to be what they're referring to.
Because that's such a, I mean, obviously it's just one guy's sort of his particular phrasing, but that idea that it would piss off the fans. Resident Evil fans are kind of divided as to from Resident Evil 4 onwards was the action route, and that's kind of what they're getting back to for RE3. And I know I absolutely adore RE4, but to this day we still get some comments on the Twitter threads when we put articles out just being I don't like Resident Evil 4 and the direction it took the franchise in. And so I kind of wonder how they... Yeah, I know. I wonder how they meet that stuff out, because I loved RE7, but I might have loved it more if it was in third person. I don't know. I mean, that's more of a pacing thing. But I mean, do you think that going forward they'll codify what RE is supposed to be, quote unquote, by going first person forward?
Oh, I'm getting angry just you talking about this, Scott, because as much as I love Resident Evil, I love the fact that it's always allowed to change and allowed to try new things, and I think that fans, us included, boxing it into some stylistic tendencies, whether that's, the third-person style of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 2 Remake or whatever, would be a mistake in the long run, because we've had a bunch of great recent third-person Resident Evil games set in the old canon. We've had 2, we've had 3, we've had, 4, we've had even 5 and 6. And I think that, this is a series that over the decades has been given the chance to continually do something new. And I want to see them try to do more things with what they established in Resident Evil 7, because they only really had one crack at it. And I think, since then we've had 2 great third-person installments, so why not give them the option to try something new with the new main-titled ones? I don't know, going from tank controls to third-person to first-person, back to thingy. What Resident Evil is, has always been hard to define mechanically, because it's always changed so much. And I think that it should continue to kind of take those risks, because otherwise it will get stale like 5 and 6 did. You can say that they had other problems, because they obviously did, but a part of it was that they were so scared to kind of experiment with the core formula or whatever, that they just became uninspired.
I have one question for you, Josh Brown. What direction could they go in that would piss you off?
A multiplayer, man. Multiplayer. Exactly what you mentioned earlier. Just
I don't want raid-based Nemesis.
It's because I love the story, and I love the setting, and I love the atmosphere. And I think that even though I don't really mind the co-op in 5 and 6, because it does make those games a bit more enjoyable, you just lose so much of the atmosphere and so much of the tension if you don't do it well. In that, when you extend that to a multiplayer offering, when you're trying to, level up or whatever, collect weapons or go on a grind, it loses, I've said that it's hard to define what Resident Evil is mechanically, but I think we all have an idea of what it is, you know, atmospherically and thematically, with the characters, with the settings, with the types of plots. So I think you would lose too much of that going down a multiplayer route. I would like it. I would try Resistance as a sort of, you know, side thing. I'm looking forward to that. But as a main installment, if it's multiplayer at the forefront, I don't know if it's for me. Don't know if it's for me.
I remember back when they experimented with this stuff on the PS2. I know there was 2 Outbreak games, and I always loved the idea of that, but I think that was just wide-eyed, oh my god, the PS2, it can do everything. Like, oh, it can even be, you know, you can take Resident Evil online, everyone can beam in. I always liked the idea of that, but I don't think they've ever nailed matching signature Resident Evil exploration and that, you know, something's around the corner feel with multiplayer, because multiplayer hardly ever works for horror. It's one of the only genres that I mean, I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head that works better as a horror-based multiplayer. Like maybe Dead by Daylight, but yeah.
That's it. My mind first goes to Dead by Daylight and the Friday the 13th game. You could maybe have something in that mold, but I'd want it to be a sort of spin-off or additive. And I think that's completely fine if they want to do that, you know what I mean? But as a main installment, that's the only thing that would, you know, annoy me a little bit. And they can do what they want. It's their franchise, you know, I have no sway over it or hold over it. But part of me thinks something like that is best served for a spin-off, because to me, although that might be an evolution or whatever, it's a bit in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'm super curious what the hell it is. I mean, at this point, we know we're getting the reveal in April if this information is correct, which obviously last time it was, and it turned out that we got Resident Evil 3, the remake. So I guess something's coming in April, but it won't actually be releasing until, assumedly, 28th of January next year. So I don't know. I kind of am ready for them to do something with Resident Evil 8. I don't necessarily want them to continue with the rollout of remakes. Although I do think that if they did Code Veronica, at least it would shine a spotlight on that game, because that game gets completely forgotten about amongst everything else.
But I think it's just, like you said, it's time. We've had 2 remakes now in between. Resident Evil 7 came out a good few years ago as well. So I want to return to the core franchise to see what interesting ideas they have in store. And if it is multiplayer, I could just wash my hands of it and at least say, you know, maybe this one's not for me, but I'll tune in for Resi 9.
It's true. Was Resident Evil 7 3 years ago?
It might have even been longer, you know. I think that might... Was it not
2017?
17. That rings a bell. January 2017. That rings a bell.
Bad that. Not to worry. I just I had just a weird realization. I think time's completely warped in this weird capsule that we've put ourselves in, and it's just a bit strange. But yeah, let us know anything down in the comments below. What direction do you want to see Resident Evil go in? What the hell do you think they've got cooking in their ovens that'll pee everybody off? And for now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.